Minister, the first thing I actually want to bring up that is related to tenancies and tenants, is specifically to do with the pandemic, is something that I just found out literally in the last few minutes. And I would like you to do something about it as a matter of urgency. Somebody I know personally has just found himself homeless and has been told, he lives in Dáil Éireann, and he's been told that the only accommodation available for him is to share with 5 other people in North Frederick Street. This person has chronic respiratory condition, very, very bad asthma, and is extremely vulnerable. Now, I won't mention his name, Minister, but I didn't know until we rang the council and said this is unacceptable, that somebody who is medically vulnerable would be put in with 5 other people. I was informed by the council that the cocooning regime that was put in place during the height of the pandemic has been phased out. Okay, well then I appreciate if you're saying that's not the case, yeah, but I'm putting it on the public record because I really want that not to be the case. Okay? Well then, I would really appreciate, as a matter of urgency, that the DHRE, Dáil Éireann County Council, or whoever has to be contacted, is contacted as a matter of urgency and saying and told that a cocooning place must be made available for people such as this person. Right? They cannot be put into a situation where their health will be at stake. You know, they're not vaccinated yet, and so on, right? So this, they got a doctor's letter today confirming all of this, and it really would be unacceptable if that was the case. Okay, so that's the first point I want to make. Now, secondly, we will, of course, support the residential tenancies bill, and insofar as it extends a small bit of protection to a very small cohort of people who self-declared that their income loss as a result of the pandemic has affected their ability to pay rent, and that the protection against eviction and rent increases has been extended. Of course, we will support that. And similarly, support the measures that you've taken to put into legislation the USI campaign around the students having to pay only a month's deposit and so on for their rent, and the other campaign requests of the USI and the various opposition parties that support them, and I welcome those facts, okay? So we support it, right? We're more than willing to say when the government is doing something that is progressive. But it is not opposition for the sake of opposition to say, Minister, I'm not even going to use the tired cliche, one of the most tired cliches that we hear in this place about missed opportunities. To my mind, it is really almost criminal neglect that there's not more in a residential tenancies bill to protect tenants against all tenants, not just a tiny cohort of a few hundred, but all tenants against unfair evictions or no-fault evictions. We had figures coming out from TCD and Focus Point in the last week or two to the effect that 38,000 people in this country have been through homeless services since 2014. That's, I think 1% of the adult population, I think they estimated, have been in the situation of homelessness. And now I have a personal friend who's in that situation. I also, as I've raised with you repeatedly, Minister, have an entire block of tenants who are facing that in St. Helens Court in Dáil Éireann. People who've done nothing wrong. Working people, paid their rent, good tenants, a lovely community, elderly people, the new communities, working people like taxi drivers who have had their income affected but won't qualify for the protection of this bill because they paid their rent anyway, because they didn't like being in arrears on their rent. And they are going to be put out on the street. And I've been pleading with you, and I've been pleading with Dáil Éireann and so on to prevent this from happening. I heard the Taoiseach say again and again and again, we want to prevent people going into homelessness. Most of the people who are faced with homelessness are people who are being evicted from the private rental sector, and most of them are people who've done absolutely nothing wrong. but there's no protection for them. And we pleaded with you, and I plead with you again, and we put in amendments to this effect into this bill. Extend the protection for all tenants against no-fault evictions, at least until the pandemic has fully passed. But also use the interim to stop no-fault evictions altogether. Why should people be evicted who pay their rent? Now, if there's individual landlords, and you always mention the mum and pop landlord, okay, let's give them as an exception, but not the default position. We have legislation where the default position is it is okay for people to be evicted who've done nothing wrong. The default position is they shouldn't be evicted, unless there's absolutely exceptional circumstances which justify, for that individual landlord that you're talking about, an urgent financial or other need to sell. But other than that, people who are landlords, who rent out to tenants, should not be allowed to evict those tenants when they have nowhere else to go. They simply shouldn't be allowed to do it. It's just not fair. It's inhumane. And for 1% of the adult population to be going through homeless services, with all that entails, Minister, we cannot allow this situation to persist. It is brutal and inhumane. It is equally unacceptable that tenants who are paying, in my area, €2,000, €2,500 or €3,000 for two-bedroom apartments, and forget it if you're single. I mean, forget it. As many of the people in St. Helens Court are, single, looking, they were paying €800 or €900 in rent, which is a lot when you're on a moderate income. But they go and look for someone now in Dún Laoghaire, and you won't get anything less for $2,000 for one bedroom. Right? And they're going to be on the street. And the council say, sorry, we've nothing for them. Right? Are they going to be sent into North Frederick Street in a few weeks' time? Ordinary, working, decent people. It's not right, Minister. People who are vulnerable with health conditions and other things. So I am genuinely pleading with you, Minister, to do something now. Not in some time, not a review, now, to protect tenants against, what, an 8% increase of rent on top of €2,000, whatever it is they might be paying, or more, against being the terror of being made homeless for people. Right? This is real terror. Right? They have to be protected. And that wheeled out justification about the mom and pop landlord, what about them? I mean, honestly, it pales into significance compared to people being put on the street, Minister. And that's not opposition for opposition's sake. I am saying those things because I have those people coming in, crying, shivering with fear, wondering, what on earth am I going to do? And it's just not right. So we have put amendments to your bill. We will support your bill. I don't expect, because this bill is guillotined in any event, that you're going to accept them, although I think you should accept them. But I'm saying, when are you going to protect these tenants? And we are talking about tens of thousands of people who are in this situation. Constant fear. People who are, working all their lives, but whose income isn't sufficient to pay the unaffordable house prices, who are 15 and 20 years on a council list. I mean, the average waiting time in my area for council housing now is in excess of 20 years. It's just unbelievable, Minister, right? And they have nowhere to go if they're evicted. So surely, if we want to stem the flow of people into homelessness, the first thing you do, against that background, I know you'll say this is not all your fault, fair enough. You're a new minister. But what you could do now, and in my opinion it is your fault if you don't do it, is to say, while this unacceptable situation pertains, that is the legacy of successive governments, we must not put people out on the street. We're going to stop that. We must not allow a further increase in rents on top of already unsustainable rents. And we are going to immediately bring in long-term protections for people against no-fault evictions, and we're going to introduce real rent controls. And I'll just finish on the rent controls point. In other jurisdictions across Europe, it is regularly done that people actually control rents. They don't just stop rent increases, they control rents. A rent board or the local authority says you cannot charge more than this for that property. Will you not bring in those kind of rent controls? And if you're going to say we can't do it because of the Constitution, A, I'm not sure it's true, B, we have a right to housing bill that seeks to address that, and you could fast track it to actually address it so we can have the real rent controls we urgently, urgently need.